Welcome to part 2 of our 2-part series on how the restrictions of COVID-19 and the gym restrictions and not being in our typical training environments or with our typical training groups is taking us to hopefully some new reflections and some new ideas in training and our physical practice and its relationship and its relation to coaching. I know I've been learning a lot and been training differently, and it's really been good to sit down and talk to other coaches on how they're training and how these restrictions are bringing about reflections in them on not only movement practice, but the meaning behind the movement and exercise, and how this all relates to what we're doing as coaches and how we can all be better and stronger through all this. Last episode, we had Jeremy Frisch, Rob Assis, and Dr. Tommy John. This time we have Paul Cater, Rachel Balkovec, and Rafe Kelley. Paul Cater is the owner of the Alpha Project in Salinas, California. He has over a dozen years of international level strength and conditioning experience, working with teams like London Wasps Rugby, the Baltimore Orioles, USA Rugby, as well as having years of experience in working with scholastic level athletes, as well as adult populations. Paul has been a huge mentor to me in my own coaching process. He is an insightful writer, engaging coach, and someone that I'm really excited to have on this show for his first appearance on the show. Rachel Balkovec made history as the first female strength and conditioning coach in pro baseball, and then recently made history again as the first female hitting coach in pro baseball. She was a guest recently on episode 193, where she talked about not just coaching, but also organizational leadership. And Rachel has an amazing ability to take many aspects of life that go beyond just training and coaching and relate it all back to what we're doing. And I'm excited to have her back on the show for this segment. Rafe Kelley is the owner of Evolve Move Play. He has done probably more physical movement practices that I could explain in the next 1 or 2 minutes. But they range from anything from the martial arts to basketball to working with CrossFit, and now his current work in parkour, and specifically natural parkour. Rafe is an amazing teacher, not just of movement practice, but also the meaning behind human movement practice and really what it means to be human in our environment. There's so many implications with what Rafe is doing and training. And also, I really am excited to have him, because if you are near trees, if you are near nature, you have a gym. And Rafe is going to get into a little bit of his own natural parkour movement practice today. These are 3 guests I'm really excited to have, and this will finish part 2 of this mini-series. It's been a fun ride, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get on to it. So your departure, you have one of the nicest and most awesome, it's like the Mecca, man, your gym. I mean, I've always loved going down there. But I would say that the best training sessions that you and I have probably had together have been outside your gym, doing things like running on the trails and the beaches and the dunes and everything that goes there. I mean, it's been good all around, but how's your transition been, getting away from the, what did you call it before, your gym?
The pretty prison, the gilded cage.
How's your time away from the gilded cage been now in this return to essentials or essentialism?
Yeah, it's been I would say career and life saving. I mean, I don't use that. I don't say that lightly. I think I had gone so far away from my own training process, regurgitating, I think novel ideas, but that are old for me. Definitely not doing my own training, not discovering, and work, just getting so, let's say, burdened by the administrative part of that I began to loathe my career path, and I think just training itself, really. So, I mean, I've you throw a new baby in there and a toddler, and that kind of adds some different challenges. But it's been essential. I mean, it's been an absolute. I don't use this word lightly either. Blessing, and to just be forced to stay home. Fortunately, I have a nice setup in my garage, so I am able to mix in some of my favorite things. But been outside, recommit to running, really.
Yeah, that's something we had talked about before too, was that sprinting at the core of it all, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that it's interesting to see. I made a post on his Instagram, just kind of asking people what if they could pick only 2 exercises, what would it be? And sprinting is pretty common in just about. I mean, this is the crowd that follows me, so that's what you're going to see. If it's a different, if it's a CrossFit page or something else, it's probably going to be some barbell related type things or pistols.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I mean, I think the follower. I think it's what I've noticed in all the different sport realms. You know, having worked in two different professional sport realms and then privately and whatnot. The tendency is to go to what what's comfortable, what's scalable, what's understandable. I think there's a lot of mysteries in sprinting, no matter how many people, I think how people try to codify it and teach it. I think the barbell is an easier, more understandable truth, so to speak. But it can also, I think, take a lot of focus away from the essentials, like why do we lift weights, you know? And I think recently in American culture, at least, the barbell's become a culture in itself where, you know, hey, it used to be this thing you'd see in the Olympics every 4 years, really. So I think it's taken a lot, even for the people who understand sprinting and the necessity of it. It's taken coaches time away from practicing sprinting. Most of the coaches I know and respect will put more of the priority on the barbell instead of the run first, sprint first mentality.
Yeah. It was interesting.
It's a path of least resistance, I suppose. And you're able, back to the pretty prison, you're able to stay inside. You're able to, and it becomes a magnet for teaching and discussion. And it's harder to go outside and have a really in-depth sprint session, because it's probably more of a personal thing, I suppose.
Yeah, with sprinting and running too, I know one of the things that you've done, I mean, I think it was probably easier to do this a month ago than it is now, you know, with all the various restrictions and things like that. But one of the things that we've done, I know you've done, is the storytelling that goes on behind running outdoors, sprinting outdoors in various manners and constraints. And I think that it's fun to get into the nuts and bolts of sprinting, like we've done, talking about the kid in your gym who's the fastest and has that internal rotation and all that as he runs, and not the best weight room guy, but trying to dissect that. But then the other flip side of that, the other end of the spectrum, it's just delivering something to athletes that they really love and enjoy, and different forms of running. And tell me a little bit about some things that you were doing with, I think it was like dune running, but there's some storytelling behind it, or the way that you teach athletes.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, we've talked about this. The whole idea that every training session really is an experience. And that's the tricky part, because we want to be such good planners, and we want to get these periodization models and whatnot. But within that, every day is a story, is an epic novel. It's a saga of overcoming, of, you know, and obviously, you know, it's the hill running is definitely like a metaphor, but it's also, you know, there's real training benefits, obviously. But there's something about running up a hill. Even with my daughter, it's like we go for trail running, and whenever we go up, she just loves. She goes up, 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 and even my dog, like he'll run the hills, and instinctively. And there's something in an animal intuition, I think, to ascend and to climb. You know, why do we climb? Because it's there, type thing. So I think, getting outdoors, hills are metaphoric and like part of a saga and story. But you know, we can do that with any training session. I believe. I think there is a story behind every session, and we need to be open to that, how it kind of ushers in the creative process, you know, because that's what we are, I think, as strength conditioning coaches. And I've mentioned this. I think I wrote this recently, is, as far as I wanted to be this guru, technology guru, and as I pursued like PhD work and stuff, I think that's important, but I can't get away from being the encourager and the craft and like creating the culture and the climate for these stories. And, but where I'm not the star of the story, I have to make my athlete the story, the protagonist. And that's important to, I'm kind of rediscovering that in my outdoor life now,
Yeah.
and it's hard to be alone in that regard because as coaches, we do want to be these encouragers, and that's in our DNA, but we do need time alone to hone that and gain the personal experience.
Yeah. Stillness is the key. I was going to say too, tell me a little bit about, I know when you and I have gone out running on trails, and this ties maybe in a little bit, Rafe Kelley will have a spot on this episode talking about playing natural parkour and playing in trees and things like that. But we've done things where like, it's like you're out in the back, not backwoods of Marina, California, but kind of like this, like, these trails where you have to run and jump over things and hurdle over bushes, and it's almost like you're on this you're on a hunt, or you're being chased, and you're out in the wilderness, and it's like a tribal thing, and there's something that's so powerful to a story or it being an epic or something. And it's so easy when we're kids too to carry imagination into things, but we just stop it as soon as we get older, right?
I think this goes into what you've talked about, and my reality is I never get hurt. I never pull a hamstring when I'm trying to catch a football. I mean, that's just, unless you're doing like some, there's other contact or there's other external circumstances. But, when I'm tracking a ball or like a fly ball in the outfield or whatever, I always felt like when my focus was on an object, catching an object, or, that my body was in alignment and rhythm. I wasn't overextending, I wasn't overthinking technical aspects, and I don't have miles per hour on I didn't have my tracking systems when I was shagging fly balls before the game, but I felt like I was faster. At least I think when you talk about holding something, whether it's a spear, a gun, there's something, so yes, imagination, but I think there are technical aspects to diverted focus on one's own technique, being chasing something, and then we can invoke that with imagination, with whether we're training kids or training ourselves, as far as, or with your dog in the mountains or whatever it is on the streets. It's putting yourself in a story. So yeah, when we're doing street sprints, and this is my third time in a garage gym before, and actually monetizing, I suppose, and running a business. So before I changed one location, I had to stay in a garage for a while, and I was training a lot of guys, but we were always in the streets. And so we'd wait for a car to go by, and we chase the car. Or with kids recently, we were running, and we were role playing or pretending that we were being chased or hunting or something like that. There's creative process, but I think there's also real knock-on effects for technical aspects in the running itself. Yeah,
the technique, it's like that constraints-led approach, and some stuff I'm getting through some studies in motor learning and like emergences, new courses. A lot of these experiences kind of work together to help your technique come out organically. I'm not saying
without a doubt, because if the biggest problem with youth, and I've shifted from professional athletes to primarily youth, and a lot of 8th grade to sophomores, which I love. I totally love that age group, because you're able to see where they're going down this path of just following a list or memorization, but reinvigorating their creative process with movement, or even seeing my daughter now, a 2-year-old, mimicking things, but also finding her own ways to do stuff. But my goal is to have everyone leave the gym, or whether it's outside, with a story to tell, and some sort of own discovery of creativity. And that boils down to a lot of just the warm up, I think. And what I've seen a lot is the warm ups formulaic, where I think it needs to be more creative. And we've talked about that before.
Yeah. And for those people who, there's a lot of great articles you've written for Just Fly Sports in that regard, and it's changed the way that I've looked at the warm up as well. It's really changed it. It's been a total paradigm shift. I used to have all these different, it's like you have a car and all these little parts, and it's almost, or the human body is like this machine, and you have a clamshells for this thing, and you have a rotator band for this, and the athlete's just bored and it's mundane, but you can check all the things off that list by just having a more primal integration and human movement and stay in flow, and is awesome, man. That'd be a chat for another full podcast, actually. And I hope we get to do that here soon.
Yeah. I mean, you brush on it quickly. Yeah. Gameplay, obviously, that is a different topic in itself, but, having a basketball court, resourcing gameplay, but it's the real conversation to me is at the education system, and as far as young coaches, and where more and more of my passion lie is in the internship program and things like that, because these kids coming out of college are severely ill-equipped for teaching and engaging, and it's just a memorization game and the certification game. That's another topic. The storytelling in the saga is very low on the typical university and intern, that formal education list. I don't think you find that in the NSAA book. And hopefully someday. But it's hard to scale. Scalability is the issue, really, and we're discovering that. I'm discovering the boundaries and the challenges and the benefits of technology and being remote, currently, and that I think that's the most pertinent topic right now in the isolation quarantine phase, is like, okay, what is really scalable and what isn't, and where do we? Because you can go down a rabbit trail or whatever, the rabbit hole. I don't know what the saying is, but you can go down a path chasing that scalability model, and you can wake up years later thinking, wow, I've really lost my creative edge or my own process in that. And that's kind of where I'm at right now in my own garage.
Yeah. Quickly. Last question. Let's just cover this quickly, as we kind of started with it, but your own workouts, right? You've gotten away from the pretty prison or the ivory tower, and your return to minimals or essentials. And obviously you have a lot of your equipment still, if not all of it in some capacity, right? But how has this time changed you? Like, what are some ways? Are you approaching exercises in a different way? Are you returning to your roots or your true loves of movement? And what you alluded to that before. Share a little bit about that.
Right. I think it's really returned to my core principles. I haven't discovered anything new per se. It's just rediscovering my old love and what I've really tried to champion. I'm not an elite sprint coach. I don't have elite sprinters I coach. I try to put things in a context for every man. But for what's realistic in professional sport, I believe is and it boils down to this, is like everything has to filter through that ground force reaction at high rates of speed, and running, and that it takes care of so much peripheral BS, to be honest. I mean, I've learned that a bit through trying to cater to the adult clientele, and just seeing how much is done to try to emulate or replicate these forces they get with running, and it's nearly impossible. So it just, nothing matters to me other than if you can. If you practice running fast, and that's even for an 80-year-old, and we do a drill with I have an older athlete class where we just get out of a chair and run as fast as we can. And, of course that takes time to get to that with people aren't used to moving at those speeds, but like, that's just the basics, or running with my daughter in the street, so return to running. I continue to use all the tools that I love. I have my flywheel equipment. I have a barbell here, but it just hones their focus and when and how to use them. So that's where I'm kind of rediscovering the whys of, why do I love flywheel training so much? And where do I put the barbell into play? And, I actually have learned to do a little bit more floor work, a little more mobility work. I became quite negative towards it because I saw just how much time people do it, and they made a culture around it, an energy system, or the yoga like movement, or the mobility movement, or HIIT movement. And like, I've tried to place all that in a gym to sustain it. And I'm like, so I became quite negative towards those things. But now, like, oh, hey, I got to do a little of that. I got to learn how to use a Tabata timer, or download an app for that. Or I have to actually do some more yoga based movement patterns and things like that. I can't be negative, or I'm right back where of all the things I'm preaching against, like dogmatic religiosity of training, where we create a religion around a certain type of aspect of fitness, where instead of looking at the context of, hey, why does this matter? But it all really boils down to movement in a forward horizontal translation. That's survival. That's the saga. That's the quest, I believe. And it's the most efficient way to stay lean, to get to get the bodies we want to. So that's another topic itself. But so that's a long answer, as you know I do.
Yeah,
rambling.
That's all right. Yeah. So in short, it's like create a story, a saga behind the simple things, the innate things. I mean, that's like Rocky training. I'll probably say that a bunch of times on this show with all the guests. It's a return to the roots and put a saga behind it. And I think that it's that's not necessarily scalable, like you said, but it's the core of what we do. So
I mean, last point. I mean, look you see everybody trying to replicate exercises in their homes, in their living rooms, in their garages. Hey, I can squat a dog, or I can squat, or if I have a barbell in my garage, I'm like, hey, I can do that too. But I don't see many videos from the average person, strength coach, or average aspiring coach, or whatever trainer, of them just sprinting as fast as they can. And it's like I challenge everybody to go try to do that, and then you work backwards and say, well, what do I need to do to do that better? So anyway, it's hard. I'm not an elite sprint coach, but I think where the place it plays in the average athletic development experience from 10 to 80, and whether you're professional or not, whether you're a pro ball player, or whether you're a little Johnny, or whether you're Grandma Susie, it's like that needs to be our quest, is to run well and escape danger, to chase things, to hunt,
Yeah. Right on, man. Well, hey, Paul, it was really good talking to you about this stuff today. And I know, we could talk forever, but I think really good things to think about, really important elements. So appreciate it, man.
Hey, yeah, anytime.
I wanted to take a quick break from the show to share with you a little bit about what our sponsor, simplyfaster.com, now has available in their store. You hear me mention in the outro of the show all the time about the Freelap timing system in the K-Box, which I have and use regularly. But today I wanted to share a little bit more about the bar speed monitoring units that Simply Faster has, which is the GymAware and the new portable Flex unit. So let me start with the GymAware. I mention it regularly on the show. It's been referred to as the Cadillac of bar speed monitors. Carl Valley calls it a lab inside a lunchbox, as the readings you get out of the GymAware go well beyond typical concentric or just up phase of the lift velocities. Rather, you can measure the entire shape of the barbell lift in terms of eccentric velocity, range of motion, and total work done. Total work being awesome, by the way, especially like comparing a long-armed bench presser or a 6'10 squatter versus a 5'11 point guard. So you're getting all these extra metrics that you're not getting on other units. It's perfect for teams wanting to manage the weight room, and the data synchronizes to software platforms such as Coach Me Plus, Team Builder, and Athlete Monitoring. So new to the store is the Flex, which is the ultra portable and lower price travel version of the coach's favorite GymAware. So just like the GymAware, the Flex measures the shape of each rep, range of motion, total work done, eccentric dynamics. So for this and the gym aware, this is the advantage that a force plate would have over just knowing how high you jumped. You're getting many other metrics and information that go into this unit of work. Compared to similar portable bar speed monitors, this unit gets the entire rep rather than a fraction. So you have here two awesome tools. And if you're interested in upping your game in the velocity-based training and bar speed world, I would definitely recommend heading to the store at simplyfaster.com and checking into these two units. All right, let's get back to the show. Rachel, I'm glad to have you on the show again here. And I just wanted to ask, what or how has this time changed? Well, let's start with your workouts personally. I'm sure you had some good gym access before. So is there things right now that you're up to that are a little bit different?
Yes, I love my training right now, and I don't want to be insensitive to anyone out there who's at home with 3 kids in Chicago. I mean, so I have a few privileges at my disposal. One is I don't have any kids, and 2 is I'm in Florida, so I can be outside all the time, which is a game changer. So, I'm limited just like everyone else. I don't have a gym, but I was fortunate to commandeer some equipment from my gym. I usually go to a CrossFit gym to do my training. And they lent me a barbell and some plates, which is enough to do some damage. I have some rings and I have, just some dumbbells. So, I mean, my training is pretty it's pretty similar to what it was before from a resistance standpoint, but I have gotten a lot more frequent with another type of training that I'll talk about. So yeah, my resistance training is just barbell training. I don't have a ton of weight, but I have enough to keep some good resistance on me. And I usually do conditioning pretty religiously, but I haven't, in the previous to COVID, I wasn't running a lot, but now that's what I have. So I don't have any kind of assault bike or a row machine, so I don't have anything to do that. So I've been doing a lot of running, which has been good for my pacing. So that's always good. But I've been doing a lot of pool training. And so I'd love to share this, but this is not my idea. I did not make this up. I don't want to take any credit for this, but I just want to pass it on because I think it's awesome. I went to a retreat a couple of years back that's run by Gabrielle Reese and Laird Hamilton, who are the most awesome power couple ever. They're married. Laird Hamilton's a famous big wave surfer, and Gabrielle Reese is a famous professional beach volleyball player. And they run these retreats, and one of the key pieces of the retreat is teaching this underwater training. And basically, it's you take weight underwater with you. You take dumbbells underwater and perform different exercises. One of which is very simple. You just swim with a weight underwater. So I hold a 25-pound dumbbell to my chest and swim underwater for as long as I can, and then come up for breathing periodically. Or I take 2 40-pound dumbbells and walk across the pool with these 40-pound dumbbells while I'm holding my water. So basically, I'm holding my breath. So basically, this does a couple of things. It takes stress off of your joints. We all know that. Swimming takes stress off of your joints. I am not a huge swimmer traditionally. I don't like to go swim for cardio, but I have loved this training, and it's brings a whole different physicality to water training. And so taking the stress off the joints is one thing. However, holding your breath underwater while you're performing physical tasks is really hard. It's really hard. Get your heart rate up quick. So you're getting this ridiculous conditioning workout with almost zero stress to your body from a musculoskeletal standpoint. So it's a different type of you get out of the water from this training and you're exhausted, but your body doesn't feel it. So that's been my biggest, I've just had more time, and also I've kind of been restricted to a pool, and I happen to have a pool in my backyard. And also there's a pool open here that, we just stay respectful distance of each other at the pool and do that. So that's been fantastic. And I do want to touch on the actual breath portion of that is something that is huge. So part of the reason why, of course, it gets your heart rate up, but part of the reason why it's so phenomenal for training your endurance or training conditioning is because you're holding your breath, which increases your CO2 tolerance. So all that means is, your lungs or your body is constantly trying to expel CO2. So it's a waste gas. It's a waste product of your body. So you're constantly trying to expel CO2 from your body. But if you're holding it in while you're doing the exercises, And especially when you're underwater and you're a bit compressed from the water pressure, makes it that much more difficult. And then your body, it's like CO2 is almost a poison. So if you hold the CO2 in your lungs for a longer period of time, your body kind of gets used to that or conditioned to the CO2 being in your lungs. And therefore, when you're in a stressful situation, like in a, not me, but like as an athlete, I'm speaking now. So when you're in a stressful situation where you're kind of exhausted, you're at the end of the game, or you're a pitcher and you're in a stressful situation, and your body's producing more of this, basically your body is more resistant to the CO2 in your body. So I don't know if I really described that very well. Hopefully I'm not butchering it too bad. But yeah, this is a technique that I learned at XPT Life is what it's called. And Laird Hamilton, the surfer, would do this basically to train for surfing. They would take big rocks and walk on the sand in the ocean, like underwater, and train with these big rocks. And then he's basically turned it into this like training technique. It's phenomenal. It's something that I just like enjoy. It's fun. But also, like I said, I mean, I get done and I feel like I've just ran a marathon, even though, okay, I shouldn't say that I've never ran a marathon, but I feel like I'm exhausted. But again, like my muscles aren't sore. My body hasn't taken the beating that it normally would. So I'm getting to do a lot more of that. And I would say that's one of the most enjoyable parts of it. And then on top of that is just the breathing aspect of, I always find that when I'm in like a downtime for a good amount of time, not downtime like 10 minutes at the end of a day or even an hour or 2 hours, like when I have time alone for a week or 2 weeks, some of you parents out there are like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. But when I have my time to myself, I really get into a more aware relationship with my breath. And so if I can notice myself shallow breathing or vertically breathing, lifting my chest to breathe, or holding my breath much easier. So it just keeps me in tune with like how I'm feeling with recovery wise, how I'm feeling just stress levels wise. And it's also just a reminder to me of how important my breathing is. So we just covered a lot in the past 10 minutes, but that I would say that would be like kind of how I'm taking this approach to my entire physical well-being during this time.
Yeah, I think within that specifically too, I think the breath in general is something that we don't often look at or look at enough. And you definitely are fully, that's everything when you're doing that kind of training. And I've read books, or I have not read, but I've heard of books like The Oxygen Advantage, and I'd heard of that, like CO2 tolerance, or if you're just nose breathing, and
yes.
Yeah, so it definitely strike. I'd imagine, like, did you say you were not running right now because, or you're just doing this instead of running?
I am running. I wasn't running a lot before. I was using just some stuff at the gym and kind of doing more circuit training, I guess. So I wasn't running a ton, but this is forcing me to run a lot. And so that's been really good for my pacing. But while I'm running, I don't know if you were going here, but I'm going to go here for you. While I'm running, my breathing, basically I'm trying to stay nasal breathing as much as possible. But if anything, I just take note of when I'm losing that ability to do that. So I do nasal breathing. So for example, the other day I went out and did 2 miles and I was doing them for time. So I was really pushing the pace a bit. And I was able to complete the first mile completely nasal breathing. And then I took about like a 5-minute rest. And then I did a second mile and I lost nasal breathing like the last 25% of the mile, the last maybe 400 meters. And that's pretty good for me. Like usually I have to break my nasal breathing in the first mile as well shortly. So I just try to take note of my breath and let that be the indicator of what's going on with me physiologically speaking.
Yeah, that's essentially where I was going. I did want to ask as well. I mean, you'd said you don't run often, and I'm sure you probably don't have necessarily like, oh, this is my best 5K time or mile time, or maybe you do. But I was curious how doing that type of work had impacted your ability to run. I think sometimes, especially those of us who are a little bit more inclined for speed or power or that type of thing, to get your conditioning or a lot of your conditioning through running. I feel like it might be a powerful thing to get your conditioning or your aerobic conditioning on a level through the type of work you're doing with the breath, and then running on a small. Does that make sense? I was just curious how you were noticing your running being impacted through your breath and the water.
Oh yeah. No, all of it, all of my conditioning, even just like, I want to say even just in my like life, like I think it's actually just like anything else, when you pay attention to your technique, like in the weight room, I think you probably have just a bit of more of awareness, even just when you're like standing around. And I think like with for sure, I use nasal breathing as a training tool within my like exercise regimen. So then when it comes time, if I just want to go ham on something, I don't necessarily force myself to stay with nasal breathing because it is restricting the amount of airflow. So it's more of like it's almost like carrying weight on your back a little bit. Like it's like wearing a weight vest, but for your breathing. So I'm challenging my breath. And I think that it makes it easier when I do want to go ham, or just like at the end of a workout, when I like start to kind of suck air, like it makes it easier because I've done that training beforehand, or it just fights off that like my critical power is higher. So the term critical power is just basically like the highest amount of power you're able to hold before you kind of go like over the top and you are huffing and puffing and breathing hard. So, I mean, it definitely affects my training in that way positively, but also, like I said, I'm just so much more aware. In the past 2 to 3 years, I'm just so much more aware of my breathing. And when I'm in a stressful situation, or just even when I'm not, like sometimes I'll notice myself shallow breathing or holding my breath, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on with me right now? And I'm like, oh, yep, okay, I was just thinking about this person that I hate. No, I'm just kidding. Or maybe, but seriously, like, oh, what was I just thinking about where my breathing just changed? Or I started holding my breath because I was anxious about something that I was thinking about, So I think just being more in tune, your body is so intelligent, and oftentimes will give you a signal of what is going on before you can like process it. So for example, you like, let's say you're speeding and I know many people can relate to this. You're speeding and you pass a cop, and all of a sudden your face gets red and you're like hair stands up, and like it is instantaneous. So and that's something that you consciously know what happened, right? The cop passed you, you're speeding, and you're kind of like shit, and you just get this like physical response. But a lot of times we're not like cognitively aware, but our body is responding. It's really incredible. So I just think that it started out with training, but I think that breathing is a huge part of training, and just also just regulating your life responses, not just your training responses. So being in touch with your breath and understanding that you think you're calm, but are you really? Like you're like, I'm totally under control, and you're shallow breathing and holding your breath and whatnot. So I think it's just a good indicator of where you're at.
Yeah, when I've done anything, I haven't done that actual training specifically. I know my friends and I used to have competitions in the pool in the neighbor's backyard at who could do the most laps underwater and all that type of stuff. And I was far better under the water than swimming on top of the water. But I always felt like, and even doing things now, like I do like the Wim Hof method and a lot of like the breath hold with the cold water. And there's something that's extremely meditative and like centering in that type of work as well. And I feel like that's extremely valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's always good to, I feel like especially times like these, it's always cool to do something that we probably wouldn't have been doing a lot of otherwise. And so in terms of just attitudes or just ideas and thoughts on coaching in general, in all this downtime, have you been looking at the art of coaching, or just coaching in general in any sort of new light? Or has this time, when we all get back to work at some point, what do you think some things from this time might have carried through, or what are you in the midst of with that right now?
I'll just take it from like a general learning perspective. Like I think you're asking like, because everyone's doing these webinars which is wonderful, like so amazing to see. But I'm just studying, like I just finished I Am Malala, which is the story of a young woman who is the youngest ever person to win the Nobel Peace Prize. She stood up for women's education in Pakistan when the Taliban was pretty bad there. She was shot by a Taliban member. I am reading The Long Walk to Freedom. This is the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. I'm just reading like historical leader books. I'm not, frankly, I'm not diving into the X and O's right now. I'm communicating with the players mostly just like very casually. And then if they want to send me video of their swings and stuff, I do. But I'm trying to be sensitive to, like, I don't know what these guys are feeling. You know, are they fearful that they might lose their jobs in baseball? So I'm not like diving in. Everyone's like, oh, are you sending video and doing webinars with your players? I'm like, well, no, I'm just asking them how their mom's doing, you know, and and just talking, you know, shooting the shit a little bit. And then if they send me some videos of their swing, I look at it. And if they don't, I don't. And in the meantime, just studying their swings online on our internal database. But I don't know, man. I just think that for me personally, I don't necessarily think you have to like study coaching to be better as a coach. Sometimes I think it has its time and its place, but there's definitely room for other areas of growth that can contribute to you as a coach.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree more. Maybe the way I framed the question, even in my own personal work and writing, I've just been thinking a lot about a lot of topics on coaching, but again, not in the X's and O's, more from just things outside the field, just general. Yeah. Like I've been reading a book that has perspective of the world in general and economics and how we are, and just a lot of different topics. And I think it all kind of, every time I can feed that back into sport and coaching in my job, when I get back to doing that a little more regularly in the in-person medium, I think that it'll be a powerful thing. So it's just good to get outside and to get outside the field and read stuff that I think definitely it still relates to it. How we do anything is how we do everything. And you and I have talked about that a bit, just understanding that being a well-rounded human gives you perspective, you know? And so I just have never felt, and there's nothing wrong with being someone like this. For me, I just don't think my strength is being a guru in one area of like X's and O's or periodization or whatever. It's always been that I want to understand a more big picture global view and then, you know, be able to relate to a lot of people. So. Yeah, it's awesome, Rachel. Before sometimes I'm not used to these little short mini clips like I'm a full length episode, but I know our time's about up here. And I know last time you were on, you were sharing a little bit about your GoFundMe project. So could you quickly recap that again before we get off the line here? Sure. Still going. This was the end of the third week, just came up yesterday, and it's been great. It's almost $3,000 now, which is really cool. That's more than I could give by myself. And I'm just encouraging everyone to give $5 if you got it. $1, it makes a huge difference. And basically you can go to the link in my bio. And for me personally, I wanted to pledge $5 a day that MLB is off, because I'm off of work, but I'm not out of work. And I just know that a lot of people are feeling it right now. So I wanted to pledge some of my own money, and I'm just inviting everyone to do the same if they can. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on again, Rachel. It was really good to talk to you. Absolutely. Rafe, hey, great to talk to you, man. And I'm excited to talk to you particularly because you are somebody who I think's exercise routine outside of some partner stuff has been not necessarily altered a lot by everything going on. Yeah, I'm still going out and playing in the woods every day, or not every day, but as often as I get a chance to. Avoiding a few spots that are highly trafficked, but mostly training in the woods is probably about as safe a place as you can train right now. Yeah, I think that this is just the thought that I've had. Like, this has been my overarching thought. And I'm sure you're the first of these segments that I'm doing. And I'm sure I'm probably going to reiterate this a lot, but all of a sudden the rage is body weight training. But the thing is I feel like it's done with a connotation almost of you have to downgrade a little bit because you got to lift barbells before, and now you just have to do pistols and burpees or something, right? Like, I mean, not that that's a bad thing, but playing in the woods is just something that's totally outside that box, you know what I'm saying? And I think there's a lot of power to that. You see a ton of people on social media doing, extra push-ups or whatever. Like, hey, here's a push-up challenge. Here's this challenge. Here's a that challenge. I mean, I'm my strength, I'm lucky enough to have a little home gym, so my strength routine doesn't have to change at all.
but my strength routine is like once a week right now, doing upper body stuff and making great gains on that. So that's pretty fun. But what we're focused on is not so much that level, the strength level, which is where a lot of people focus on, but on the movement, on the movement level, on how you can become a better athlete. This is the funny thing about the whole fitness culture right now is most of it doesn't actually make you a better athlete. Right? Like, I'm going to bang on CrossFit for a second, but the fittest athlete on the planet, no, I'm sorry, fittest exerciser, sure. But they're not athletes because they don't move like athletes. They don't have perception action coupling to environmental challenges, that are complex and require, intelligent decision making at a high level. Like there's some of that, obviously there's some strategy in a WOD, but there's just nothing that compares in throwing weights around and doing ring muscle ups to being able to navigate through a complex environment or around another player or deal with contact or any of those things that we have. And so, so that's the level that we're interested at, is how do you make somebody good at solving movement problems? And the cool thing about that is that there's lots of that you can do when you don't have access to a gym.
Yeah, for sure. I think about the importance of some information, right? Just information in the workout, information in the environment as an important factor. Because I think that body weight stuff that you would do body weight in your living room could be a lot more exciting if there's just information there all of a sudden. That's not just the floor or the wall or whatever. And I was out by myself at a basketball court just doing dunks the other day. And the more I learn, the more I understand just the little nuances. Like when you throw the ball up in the air and it's bouncing and you have to go get it, you just created a constraint that's all of a sudden everything changes. Like, and it excites your body, electrifies your body. Like all systems are more on board for what you're doing versus just going up to touch the rim or something. There's a lot more richness to it. And so I feel like working in nature, working in a tree environment with trees, that's even more information rich, can just get so many systems lit up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you feel that sense of play, and that sense of play is kind of like that flow state is that state where you have like an optimal amount of information that's coming into the nervous system that's attuning your nervous system to being more intelligent at dealing with those fundamental things. Like when you bounce a ball and you go up to get it, you're learning to read types of information from the environment that will show up in lots of different tasks. And your nervous system's picking up on that and saying, oh, okay, this is challenging me in a way that's very interesting and that it's feeding me really interesting information. Whereas if you just stand on a rim and jump up and test your vert over and over and over again, that's not giving you nearly as much. It's kind of treating the body as just a machine and not getting the perception aspect of it going on. And that's the wonderful thing about moving in the trees is, this is the information that we evolved to attune to, right? We evolved to move through these environments, and there's something inherently rewarding about how much sophistication and how much integration of the body-mind system is going to happen when you're doing that. I've been playing in a particular group of trees. It's kind of interesting. I looked at these trees years ago. That's a group of Portuguese laurel trees. They're fairly close together. And so there's all these trunks, and you can kind of like climb between the trunks. And I looked at it years ago, and it was like I did a few things, but it wasn't that interesting to me. And then I took some friends there recently to another area nearby, and we just decided to do a run to warm up, and we ended up at these trees. And I was like, well, let's give these trees a chance. And so we climbed up into the canopy of the trees, and all of a sudden discovered that we could make routes all around the entire canopy of like 7 trees or 8 trees. And there's all this, really interesting complex coordination of hand and foot placements and swinging the body and jumping the body and landing with precise foot placements on the trunks and the branches in these trees. It feels like, for me, it's like very chimpanzee-like. I just watched, right before I found this place, I just watched BBC's Dynasties. And I was watching the way the chimps move in the trees and how much it looks like parkour. And so then when I found this place, I was like, this is it, man. I'm doing it. I'm feeling exactly the kind of environments that we evolved in. And it's just really interesting how unique each movement is. And then when you finish that training there, it's like, I don't warm up before I train in that spot. Right? Like, why do you warm up? You warm up because, well, you need your body temperature to go up, but you also want to move your body through big ranges of motion and expose all the tissues to different kind of, make sure all the tissues can go in all the directions that they need to go. Right. And then you warm up also to get your nervous system and your arousal up to an appropriate place and your emotions tuned in. But in an environment like that, when I just start moving in the trees, I'll go slow for a little while. That's the warm up, is not doing it as intensely. But then as you're moving, essentially, there's so many angles, there's so many different force vectors moving through you. There's so many different relationships between your different aspects of your structure, your grip versus your stance versus, the position of your torso, how your feet are interacting with the surface, that you're getting this enormous kind of set of inputs that are helping get the body moving in any number of ways. All the stuff that you would lay on the ground and try to make sure that you did, all the rotations and rolls and, lunges, etc. It's all happening, right? It's automatic in that environment. The environment forces you to move the way that a human needs to nourish their structure. And so you move through it and then you warm up, and then like my upper body feels so worked afterwards, right? Because I'm just gripping these branches and swinging from them and jumping and catching them, muscling up and casting up on them. And so it's like you have this incredible full body integration of coordination and strength and agility and everything else you're looking for as you move through there.
Yeah, I like the idea of not needing to warm up, because I think that the more we make things artificial and manufactured, the more the warm up becomes artificial and manufactured. It's almost like the more you get out of the natural environment, the more it becomes, it's like systems thinking, where it's like not a complex system, it's a linear system or something like that. And so let's do a linear warm up, then let's do linear sets and XYZ. But in nature, it's all built in. So I really like that. I would totally agree. Same thing if I'm doing anything like that. Even honestly, even when I'm sprinting these days, the warm up's just kind of some sprint stuff. That's not lower intensity, but it's nothing too substantial. So when you go out and you, like a chunk of time, like how would you divide up your time? Are you doing like runs? Like, is there any like sprinting components or running through, or is there different themes each day? What does an average day look like for you front to back when you're working out in the forest?
Yeah, it's hard. I always go in with certain, like, usually the day isn't what I plan. I'll say that, right? There's always a plan, and then no plan survives contact with the environment, because you get intrigued, you get excited about things, and then you think that you're like, oh, I'm going to spend 20 minutes in this tree, and then it's 45 minutes, and then you don't have as much time for the next thing you're doing. So like a typical, I'll just describe a couple of recent sessions. So the last time I went out, I went to those trees that I was just talking about, and I just moved around in them until I was warmed up. And then I found certain routes that were exciting for me. And so I brought a couple of like 10-pound bumper plates. I threw them down on the ground in front of like a little concrete pillar in the ground, because I wanted to work jumps and striding actions. But that's not so much something that those trees offer me. So I was just taking breaks and going over and striding and doing a precision jump, right? And so I do that. And then I just kind of follow whatever felt really interesting in the tree. And then I also really specifically wanted to work on doing running jumps to landing on at the trunk of the tree, where I have to catch with my hands and my feet, what we call a cat leap in parkour. But they're intimidating and scary when you're going to a narrow surface. And then the biggest one, and this is what you see with you'll see chimps do this. The lemur called the sifak is the best in the world of this. There's a shafak. They do cat to cat. So you start facing one tree in a hanging or clinging position, where you have your feet and hands on it. And then you have to jump off and turn 180 and catch the next tree. And so there's a lot of stuff that opens up for us in being able to move between vertical tree surfaces if we're good at this, but it's quite intimidating. So that was like, I'm going to work on that. So I worked on those things together. So I'd take some time, and then I found this really cool reverse vault in between two branches of another tree nearby. So I do that, and then I come back. So I just loop through these things in a kind of circuit. And I didn't pay attention at the time. Actually, I didn't have any specific sets. I was just kind of paying attention to my body. And then I also knew that I wanted to work on cast ups, which is a skill where you have the branch directly along your hips, and you try to swing your body up behind you and bring your feet down into a squatted position on top of the branch. So this is the fastest way to get from like the end position of a muscle up or a kip up to the top of an object. But it can be very intimidating to do on something high. And especially like, when you're in gymnastics, you have a consistent bar that's the same every time. Or even in urban parkour, a lot of times you have a metal bar that's relatively consistent. But when you're on tree branches, it's like some of them are thicker, some of them are narrower, some of them tip and sway and turn on you in different ways. Or they might have moss on top or whatever it is. So there's lots of things that make that more complex. So it's a really key skill. So I'm repping that out, getting those reps in as I play. Then I walked over to another spot and worked some long jumps. So I was doing like a 14.5 foot running jump to a precision, and I intentionally found some like bark dust because it was soft on my knees, and I didn't want to overstress my knees because I had actually my knees started hurting because I've been sitting too much, doing too much work. And then I finished by going to this beautiful maple tree that has like a wall run that allows me to catch a branch, catch another branch, and then swing up and grab a third branch and come up. This is really, it's the trunk of this maple has big lugs in it, so you can climb it like a rock wall. And then I was trying to like speed climb it by jumping from lug to lug until I got to the branches. And so that was pretty much it. Like I just did those things. I was just trying to attend to like my fatigue level to make sure that I had enough energy left to do everything. Oh, and then I forgot I did a bunch of flips in there too. So that's that was like when we work with people and we're beginning the process, we'll give more structure because structure helps people, right? But as you learn to play the game, the structure doesn't have to be as explicit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right on. It definitely makes sense as you move through, and that's even as I've been doing that type of work. It's like the more I just watch your videos right now, and then I've checked out that PDF you sent up with all the different games and all those things, and so that's given me. But the more I watch you, the more I'm like, oh, there's another thing you could do. There's another thing you could do, and it really builds on itself. I think that a lot of people, I mean, like it or not, a lot of people. I know we covered this with like your athleticism. Like you'd mentioned, it was easy for you to dunk a basketball, maybe even more so than when you were like 20 years younger, formally training for it, right? With all the way this has impacted your body. Because I think people hear movement or they think playing and they don't associate it with getting jacked or getting cut, right? Like that's just where our society goes, reverse aesthetics. Yeah. And I know we've had conversations where you've talked about you used to work in CrossFit and you're actually getting pretty close to the world leading standards in some of these WODs or whatever. So how has your like body changed in the sense that you've done more of this in terms of just strength, upper, lower, because you do still lift, body composition? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's been an interesting journey on that. Like I've always kind of focused on the movement side because, that's just been where my interest is. But I was also struggling. I had IBS. So I had like serious gastrointestinal issues for a long time, and I was suffering from chronic fatigue. So despite like, funny story. So I told you that I went paleo and I got really lean and I was doing really well. And then I moved to Seattle and started teaching CrossFit, and I ended up in a situation where I was teaching CrossFit. Basically I would teach the 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., noon, 4, 6, 7, and then at 8, I would get to teach my parkour classes.
Whoa.
So then I was trying to train parkour on top of that. And I was like mixing parkour with CrossFit principles. So I was doing like parkour WODs, like super high intensity circuits where you're doing them continuously, AMRAPs and stuff. And then I was running Mark Ripeto's Starting Strength. And then they really wanted me to do some of the WODs that they were programming as well. But I would only do a couple of those a week because I just was breaking down. So over the course of that like 6 months or whatever that I was really kind of seriously doing this CrossFit stuff, I got to doing a 440 deadlift at a body weight of 210. And I did 355 back squat for 5 reps, and I cleaned 250. And then for CrossFit WODs, I did Fran in 223. At the time, I think the world record was just around 2 seconds, or 2 minutes. And I actually had 2 of my pull-ups not counted on that. And I did Grace in 147. I think the world record was like 137 at that time. So I was doing pretty well with the CrossFit WODs. But the weird thing is my body comp actually went to hell during that period. Like I went from 192 to 210, and I went from probably 12% to like 18, 20% body fat, despite the fact that I was performing well on this traditional, the stuff that for a lot of people gets them lean. But I think that it was because I had these underlying health issues that I was dealing with. So recently I went carnivore, and I shed 12 pounds like that. And my body composition's improved. And then I've been getting stronger on things that were hard for me to get strong on for a long time. So all of a sudden, I'm 38 years old, and my strength is rising faster than it has in years. I do want to say, just because I'm sure that will be controversial for a lot of people, the carnivore thing. And I'm not trying to say that carnivore is the ultimate answer for everybody, or that it's the best diet in general. I think that for people with autoimmune underlying issues, it can be really, really useful. And if you're looking at body comp, basically what you're trying to do is get yourself to eat less calories without messing up the hormonal balance between leptin and ghrelin. And so you can cut weight basically doing anything so long as the calories are low. But if when you're keeping your calories low, you're driving your ghrelin level up and your leptin level down, you're always going to have a rebound on the other side, and often it's going to be worse. So what works about the carnivore diet, in addition to the fact that it's helping you heal these underlying autoimmune conditions, if you have them, and many people don't need to necessarily take this approach, but it's just very high satiation. Right? You just get full and you don't want to eat. And this really works with any mono diet. The potato diet works the same way. So that's just kind of off topic. But if people are interested in body comp, that's my take on that. And I like, my body comp's not the best in the world. I'm not the best advocate for, getting abs through movement training. Lots of athletes that I've worked with have, but they haven't had, I don't think, the underlying autoimmune conditions that I have. Like I have vitiligo, which is where my skin is bleached white in certain places by an immune system attacking itself. So I've been able to achieve lots of strength, lots of elasticity, lots of explosiveness. Jacked and ripped has not been my my strong suit.
Yeah, for sure. There's obviously a lot of other things going on there. Yes, I'm glad you brought diet up. I guess I think that the way that we tend to view exercise, it's like in some way we look at like people working out in prison, right? They got nothing to do and they just do tons of reps. Like Dan John has talked about this. It's like there's no willpower needed. Just I'm here. Let's do some push-ups. Let's do some of this and that and the other thing. And that works great for body composition. And I'm sure a blended approach can be great too. But I know from my own experience in just playing more, like a day where my nervous system feels a little down and I had a sprint day on the table, to go and just set a course where I'm running 30 to 50 seconds through some trees might feel way better the next day. And I got some good running in and everything. It's just like you're zooming out on the variability. You're taking more, you're expanding the degrees of freedom. I just think it's an option that's open for pretty much anybody these days. So I think it's good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you sent me a message about that, about like, you're basically experiencing so much more variability, right? And so you're not getting pattern overload, and you're exciting your nervous system, right? And you're getting into that flow state. So you're getting a lot of adaptation, a lot of motor learning. And, I was thinking about this in the most recent articles that I wrote about this idea that essentially, what are the fundamental masteries that you need that help you in any sport? It's like, well, you need to be able to move well through your environment. So the environment can be a basketball court and other players that you have to move around, or it can be, some trees that you're moving through. And you might not think that those are closely related, but fundamentally it's about being able to see the space, perceive it, and move through it. And the more locomotive options you have, the more diverse your body is, the more capable it is, the better you're going to move. And if we think about how sport makes us a better mover for the rest of our life, part of that, in my opinion, has to be this: how do we build the capacity of the athlete to move in the environment? And we didn't evolve to run on basketball courts and flat ground, right? We evolved for a diverse environment. So yeah, I think, fundamentally it's like, how do you move through the environment? How do you manipulate objects, right? And then how can you move and deal with another human being? That's the fundamentals.
Yeah, I know a lot of people out there interested in this, and the great time to get interested in it. I know you have a few things. I know you have that PDF with various things to get started in nature, and then you have a course. Could you tell me about each of those two things for people who are like, hey, this is a great time to get started on this route, and to learn more about how to do it?
Yeah, so we just, we were going to do a whole kind of block of content around aliveness, which is a significant part of that is applying player versus player to like our parkour practice, which obviously is something we can't do as much anymore. But the other aspect of aliveness is really learning to adapt to things in the moment, right? So rather than pre-planning everything and having everything rote, it's the difference between kata and free flow sparring, right? And you can still free flow just doing shadow boxing, for instance, right? Where you're imagining a scenario and you're letting it play out and you're moving dynamically in relationship to that scenario. So we can do the same thing with some of these games that we put out. So people can check out our free PDF on the top 9 games that we start people out for adding aliveness to their training. And then we have a membership now for natural parkour, where we can support people online to get their program going. And, we really have always been advocates for the value of training outdoors. And it doesn't mean that training in gyms isn't useful, because there's a lot of community that can come from that. And there's lots of great tools, but there's so much to be learned from the outdoor environment. And there's, it's such a forgotten aspect of our culture. Like, so many kids never got that experience of being able to just go and play outdoors and learn their environment. So we're trying to essentially educate people about that again. And I think this is, as much tragedy is happening right now, there's an opportunity for people to say, okay, if I don't have access to the gym, how can I train? Right. And there's so much out there that we're not aware of. So we built this program so that it teaches you those basic fundamental skills of how to move through the environment well, right? Vaulting, jumping, climbing, break falling, moving on all fours. But also we built a program so that it teaches you how to find spots outdoors. So it has a whole component around learning to recognize the opportunities that are out there in the environment for you to move on, and starting with finding simple things that are easy to find and moving towards more difficult things that are more enriching and more powerful to have in your environment. And then we also know that a lot of times, like what holds people back is the routine, right? The gym is a routine. It's an easy way to block out their time. And if they're starting to go to different areas around the city to find beautiful places to train or around their native environment, that can be a time management problem. So we built in a time management component to this. And we fundamentally think that the purpose of your movement practice is the growth of you as a human being. So we also added a mindfulness and journaling component to it. So, I know people are struggling with a lack of access to their movement practices. And that can have a huge impact on you physically, emotionally, psychologically. Like, people are going to be depressed because they can't do what they're used to. And so this is an alternative that can help support people. And so we've discounted it by 50% right now for anyone who wants to get on the membership. We'd love to support people in come learn what it's like to run your training outdoors and to become that more integrated human beings through the practice.
Yeah, I know that my adding work in nature has been probably the most impactful thing I've done in my own work in the last decade. So I will post the links to the PDF and the course on the show notes for this episode. Thanks for your time today, Rafe. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
All right, that closes out part 2 of our little mini series. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And as Rafe was talking about, if you want to check out either that free movement games and movement practice PDF, as well as the community, the parkour community, check out the show notes on the Just Fly Sports website related to this episode, and you can go ahead and grab those there. If you enjoyed the show, don't hesitate to leave us a rating or review on Stitcher, iTunes, whatever you're listening to. We'd really appreciate it. Special thanks to our sponsor, simplyfaster.com. Great blog and suppliers of the best sports tech in the business. So be sure to check them out and support what they do. And we'll see you guys next week with another great guest. Have a good one.